Velvy Michael, talking about Ouija boards being dangerous and to keep crystals near you. And that's true. So I do keep crystals everywhere. This is just a giant size crystal. I don't know if you can see that. But it's black obsidian. And I do keep pieces like that with me. If I do go into a place, I come back and I actually do smudging. It kind of helps clear away some of the evil yuckiness that might attach to you if you're lucky.
Ex-husbands too?
I wish.
So I was going to ask PJ, what is Spain's story on hunting? Anything special?
On Halloween?
Not so much Halloween, but just you have some special places there that people go to and tour to try and ghost hunt, find anything known.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
It's the old world, right? There's a lot of people who said they've seen stuff in old Roman ruins. Those very interesting stuff. I've heard about they're old buildings that have been built upon, they've been built upon medieval and Roman, and their subterranean is basically pre-Roman. I've heard about a lot of ghost stories in certain buildings in old Europe, and there's a lot there.
Wow.
There's a lot there.
I can imagine, because people are still living in buildings from eons ago, older than America itself. And so I can only imagine the history in some of these homes. And
where people, for example, in many parts of Spain, when a construction project begins, sometimes it's not allowed to continue because they just dig up remains, and then they have to go through this whole archaeological process, and maybe maybe it goes on for years until they get clearance, and until all the artifacts have been removed, and but people have pulled out Roman chalices from their construction site, and mosaics, and just all kinds of stuff.
Same thing happens here too. We got construction going on where they did some nasty things back here back in the 1790s, where because it was a convict settlement, that if you died, then they just didn't care, and they'd put you down there and bury over you. Even the cemeteries and things, they just build over the cemeteries because you're a peasant. So they just built over everything. They didn't care. And then they'd say, okay, we need to remove the gravestones. And they'd employ some people who were winos, because there was a plague on, and the winos wouldn't catch the disease because they were so drunk that they would dig it up. That's a true fact. And they didn't. They never succumbed to the plague. And they dug up. They didn't want to dig up anymore. Oh, we don't want to dig up anything. They did dig up bodies that were fresh, and they'd sell them. They'd sell the cadavers to people to experiment on. And others, if they were a bit too far gone, they'd just, look, we're not digging that up. We can't be bothered, because they were drunk all the time. They don't want to do digging and hard labour. So they'd just take the headstones away and sent it off. And now all the bodies are still there. And now in the city parts where they're digging up things and putting a building or something, they dig down through past the basement. They go, oh, there's a whole bunch of coffins here. And there's like 48 found in the last dig up that they had here.
Wow.
48. And there's a lot of hauntings down there too, as you can imagine.
Wow. Well, you figured somebody, maybe at that time they were peasants and whatever, and they just did
criminals.
Yeah. But at some point, somebody would have come in and said, hey, we might want to find a place for this. A little bit better place. But they just, even then, don't care. Just kind of...
Back then they said, throw out your dead. And they just got rid of them how they wanted, whether they threw them and dumped them down the harbour, or buried them, or took the time to dig, because people didn't want to do that hard labour, because it's very hot here. It's not like Canada or Colorado mountains. It's hot.
You just quoted like a Monty Python movie. Throw out your dead.
Well, that's what they did, and that's what they used to say. That's where Monty Python got it from. Throw out your dead, throw out your dead, and they did. They'd come by in a cart, horse and cart, and they just pick them up and put them there because you weren't. It was like a big quarantine thing, and they had these what they call spin doctors, and they had these beaks look like birds, and they picked them up. I don't know why, but they did. I don't know what that resembles, but they did, and they picked them up and put them there, which would have been very hard for the family because you weren't allowed out, and your loved ones getting thrown on a trolley and taken down with about 60 other people during the plague. It would be very hard to sort of wave goodbye to, you know. That's your family member, and they're just being tossed around like rubbish, you know. And where they went, no one knows. So they couldn't really follow up or go and grieve over their bodies later on because no one had any record of where they went. So there's a lot of despair down there. That's the Rocks area, if anyone's looking into that in Sydney.
Yeah, go ahead, PJ.
I keep muting myself. The what area, Joe? I'm sorry.
The Rocks, New South Wales. It's the first area that was first town that was built when they came off the boats. It's called the Rocks in Sydney. There's a lot of stuff like that.
How is Joe? Let me ask you this question. This is how do the origins of the Western people coming, not the Aborigines, but the Western people coming over to Australia? How did the origins of Australia affect the modern day character of general Australians? Are you guys more independent?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we've grown up with that over the years of generations because we were brought here as convicts, and it was like a dumping ground for the bad from England. You know, it was overrun with you know, people like Jack the Ripper was going on at the time. Some people say Jack the Ripper actually got caught and was sent out here because it seemed to stop at the time when our first and second fleets came, that the cases in England stopped. And they never caught the guy. And here we had similar cases, which was in the Rocks area, called the Nurses' Walk or the Push. They call it the Push area, and where they'd go around in the laneways and they'd do that, and they'd have these kind of murders going on.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I think growing up in Australia, that the generations from the 1800s, 1900s were very independent because after you did your time, you got a grant from the government to help build or get a farmland or something for a land plot, and you would be able to stay here and you do your time, 4 years labour, whatever, for stealing a loaf of bread, whatever it was, and you'd get a plot to go out past the city and be a pioneer, sort of like the Great Frontier in America. And so everyone was very independent there, and they didn't like the rule of the crown, if you know what I mean. And then they started to discover, hey, there's gold in them hills, you know, and like America, and they started to find gold everywhere, and they became rich quick. And the government then started to say, well, you need to pay us tax to England, to Mother England, on these gold you're finding. And they had mining tax where you couldn't mine, and you weren't even allowed to have a spade in your hand unless you had a permit. And that they all revolted because after all, these people worked hard with their hands for months, and then finally find a piece of gold. It was given to the government, and they took it, and the soldiers would come and take it, and you're getting like a couple of quid for it, which you'd never be able to survive on. And your whole point of doing that was taken off you. And they revolted, and that's what resulted in the Eureka Stockade, where everyone revolted against the government. And we became very independent then. And then when the gold came out, the gold news came, everyone came. You had people who were doctors and lawyers and stuff just coming off the boat with a spade, and they were just heading out west. They didn't know what they were doing. And you had the Chinese coming here too to be labourers, and they actually found a lot, and they knew how to hide it. They were smart. They knew how to hide it from the government, and they were actually the ones in town. If you look at any of the old 1800s towns, you'll see a lot of Chinese-owned shops. Back then with blankets or saddlery, they owned it, and all the colonials, or the whiteys, the white people didn't like it. Us, or the English didn't like it. How come they got a big shop and I'm still scrounging around with my hand? So they go and murder them, and it was very bad. But growing up, yeah, I'd say we're still independent. We're still like that, I think.
So, GAP is telling you thanks. Thanks for the.
Oh, okay, Gap. It's all right.
Yeah. You won't be able to sleep tonight, Gap.
Gonna be looking under your bed.
Where is Gap? Is he in Australia?
No, I think he's in the southern states, the southern area of the United States.
He'll be fine then. If he's in Australia, you've probably got somebody under there.
Yeah, here in the States, you probably got somebody, but it's not a ghost. It's your neighborhood mugger.